All right, we are live on YouTube, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this third edition of Digital Coptic. This is the third in a series of events that started in Berlin a few years ago and then was held in Washington, DC. And I guess as very appropriately now, Digital Coptic has moved into... on YouTube, everyone. Oh, I'm hearing myself. Hang on, I'm going to need to mute myself. Thank you for joining us today for this third edition. Here we go. So yes, this is the third event of its kind, and quite appropriately, I think it's moved to the digital sphere. I wish it was under more pleasant circumstances, but the positive result is that we have more participants in this workshop than we have had at any of the past events of this kind. The goal of this event is very explicitly to bring together people who work on Coptic, who are doing what they can to make Coptic accessible online. That includes Coptic texts, Coptic artifacts, anything to do with Coptic history, and basically put Coptic as much online as we possibly can. I'm Amir Zeldis. I teach computational linguistics at Georgetown University in Washington, DC. I'm also co-director of a project called Coptic Scriptorium, which for the past few years has been doing part of what I mentioned before, which is trying to put Coptic texts online, along with as many analyses as possible, texts that you can read, translations, and searchable annotations of those texts. My co-host is So Miyagawa. So, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is So Miyagawa. I'm a postdoctoral fellow of digital humanities at the Institute of Occidental and Oriental Studies, or Oriental and Occidental Studies, Kansai University in Osaka, Japan. Also, I'm a PhD student in Egyptology and Coptic Studies at the University of Göttingen in Germany, and in historical linguistics at Kyoto University. I'm studying Coptic, ancient Egyptian, corpus linguistics, and digital humanities. I'm a former research fellow at the German Research Foundation's Collaborative Research Center, Education and Religion in Göttingen, and the CALIA project, which is the joint project of the National Endowment of Humanities and German Research Foundation. And I'm also a research member of Coptic Scriptorium. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, So. Sorry, there are sure to be some technical difficulties throughout the day. We'll try to keep those to a minimum. With that, I'd like to briefly go over the program. We're about to start with our first talk in 5 minutes, and this is maybe an opportunity to test the screen sharing. Somebody's posting that YouTube channel has no content. I can post the exact video link for YouTube. So somebody, I mean, I obviously can see it, but let me see. I'm going to post the YouTube link into the chat for Maxim and anybody else who wants to advertise it on social media or anything else. So everybody should be able to see what we're saying here on YouTube with a couple of seconds lag. If somebody could give me a quick, yeah, Katrin is saying it's visible. Thank you. All right, that's a good sign. Feel free to post that on social media. There's no harm in that because no one can crash the video on YouTube. Okay, so with that, let me go over the program really briefly, and then we'll start with our first session, which I will chair, and then So will chair the second session. All right, can everybody see my browser window? Yeah, excellent. So this is the workshop website. You should be able to see the program here. Our first talk is going to be Elisa Sofia Linke on Coptic OCR. Then we'll have Paula Buzzi and Julian Bogdani from the PATS project. After the break, there'll be the second session, which So will chair, with talks by Frank Feder, myself, Carrie Schroeder, and actually Lance Martin should also be listed in the speakers here, but you'll see that in the slides. And then Haleli Harel from Jerusalem. Those will be all of our talks for today. I'd also like to point out that there's a discussion scheduled for after the end of each day. This is meant primarily as an opportunity for projects to coordinate future work, plan grant proposals together, things like that. And as a result, that won't be on YouTube. For that part, there's a separate Zoom link. If you don't have that Zoom link and would really like to discuss future collaborations, you can send us an email to be added to that, but it's really meant as a project internal meeting, primarily for people who were in a bilateral German-American collaboration that we had called CALIA, which is kind of the sponsoring organization of this workshop. All right, I would like to then ask our first presenter, Elisa, to prepare, and I'm going to switch over to her in a moment. We're going to be doing this in exactly the same way tomorrow at the times listed here. So please join us tomorrow as well.
Okay, also may I add something? Yeah, also if you have a Twitter account, please tweet about this workshop with Twitter hashtag sharp digital Coptic 3, as in email which I sent. Yeah, this conference aims at sharing reports from various digital humanities projects in Coptic studies and promoting cooperation among projects. The digital technology and digital platform are getting more important under this COVID-19 crisis. We will have wonderful reports, talks, and discussions from digital projects in these 2 days. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sil. And with that, we will switch to Elisa. I'm going to try to give you permission to share your screen and unmute you. So now you still have to unmute yourself and share your own screen. I'm just giving you the permission.
Okay.
Right.
Yes, that works. It'll just take
Excellent.
a couple of seconds.
So please join me in welcoming Elisa, whom I've known. Actually, I think you were certainly at the first meeting, weren't you? So you're an alumnus
the
of
second.
digital.
I believe it was the second. It was one in Berlin.
The Berlin one was the first one, I think. I mean, maybe we had some meeting that wasn't called that.
Oh, then I was even at the first one. Cool.
I think so. So please join me in welcoming Elisa, who is going to talk about Coptic OCR. It's very exciting. Elisa, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Please allow me to switch off my video now as I feel uncomfortable. If it is on, I will switch it on again for the discussion. So, dear colleagues, almost 4 years have passed since the last international meeting of the digital Coptology community at the 2016 Coptic Congress in Claremont. Since then, there have been a lot of new developments with respect to Coptic OCR. I even have some news for those of you who have heard my last talk in Berlin in last November. And the news I have for you are all good news. They pertain to more fonts, better models, and a jump in usability, namely a graphical user interface. This is important, maybe a decisive step forward for those who didn't find the idea of juggling code on the command line as thrilling as advanced Linux users and programmers. The presentation of these advances will also structure the talk, as I will present the set of fonts for which OCR models are available. Calamari, the new OCR software with the best character accuracy rate reached so far for Coptic. And OCR for all, the graphical user interface into which Coptic OCR models trained by means of Calamari can be loaded and used. But before I tackle these points, let me give you a short chronological overview of what Coptic OCR has done since we last convened in Claremont. In 2018, Coptic OCR became an official project when it was awarded with a 6-month postdoc fellowship at the Campus Lab Digitization and Computational Analytics at the Göttingen Center of Digital Humanities. In 2019, the results of the fellowships have been published at the 3rd International Conference on Digital Access to Textual Cultural Heritage in Brussels. And at this StarTech conference, I heard about the new OCR program called Calamari and decided to test it. So I trained data of more fonts and performed model training for my usual OCR software called Octopus, as well as this brand new Calamari. And first results of this were presented in the Berlin Digital Classicist Seminar in November 2019. And then this year, I started working with a great suite of tools for the whole OCR workflow, which is called OCR for All, and which I will show to you in the last part of my talk. OCR is part of data acquisition and more precisely of text digitization. The OCR workflow can be schematized in the following way. After some preparatory steps, it starts by pre-processing. Then there's the recognition process itself, and finally post-processing, also called post-correction. Pre-processing and post-processing are computer assistant, but still manual steps, while the recognition step is fully automated. Today, I will mostly skip the machine learning part that you see down here in gray. Yes. Depending on the quality of the print and the quality of the digital image of a print, pre-processing is usually the most time-consuming part of the workflow because it requires the most human intervention. What is grouped here under the term image preparation consists of several steps. Not all of them are compulsory, depending on the properties of your digital images. But they can include rotation, deskewing, splitting 2-on-1 scans into individual images per page, despeckling, that is the removal of stains and blotches from a digital image, content selection, and reformatting from PDF format into TIFF or PNG formats. I will skip the layout analysis here because it is a step specific to the OCR for all tool, to which I will come back later. Binarization is the transformation into a binary image consisting only of black and white pixels. And finally, segmentation. In segmentation, the individual images are cut into snippets line by line, so that as a result, there's one image file per text line. The character recognition process itself is, of course, the core of OCR. Characters are extracted from the prepared images, and as I already said, this step is fully automated. Post-processing is the correction of the OCR result, the elimination of errors made by the OCR model during recognition. So what about the news that I have announced? So far, we have robust models for the following fonts. As you can see, it's 4 fonts, and these are widespread in Coptology. In the choice of the fonts, I followed So Miyagawa's suggestion to start with fonts used in the Scriptores Coptici subseries of the Corpus Scriptorum Christianorum Orientalium. This is also reflected in their names as C, SSC, and then a single digit. Actually, I would prefer to name them after their designer, as in the case of the font called Aubert here. But so far, I have hardly found any information about them, except for what is said in the book of Boursellier, which Heike Behlmer kindly pointed me to. Therefore, I'm always grateful for information about the history of the fonts and the people who designed or cut them, as well as their history of distribution among publishing houses and printers' shops. One priority of the training of OCR models for these fonts, one objective besides a high accuracy rate, was robustness. And by robust, I mean that the model should work for varied data. This is why our training data consisted of pages from several print text editions. So that means not only different books, but also different scans. The scans itself are inhomogeneous with respect to resolution and the hardware used to produce them, which is why we did not scan them ourselves, but used existing scans, which we downloaded mostly from online archives like archive.org, but also homepages of Coptologists like coptica.ch and Aline Zousou's blog. Models were trained on text in the Sahidic and Bohairic dialects if these were available. And we chose editions with different layouts, so editions with a 2-column layout and a 1-column layout. Training and test data have not been normalized. For the user, this has the advantage that the output is as close to the printed original in the edition as possible. And the user can then perform normalization according to their needs or the standards defined for their own project. And we choose training data with the aim to cover the largest character set possible for each font, including obviously lowercase, but also uppercase characters, all supralinear strokes, various punctuation marks, and characters used in philological markup. Why is this important? Well, it is important because models will achieve better recognition results for data that is similar to what the model has seen in its training process. As a consequence, the training data should reflect the reality of variation found in editions of Coptic texts. And this is what we try to achieve. But let's talk numbers now. As I promised in the title, I have even better models than in 2016. And better model means a higher character accuracy rate. In the next slide, I will show you a comparison of the character recognition accuracy of Ocropus, the software that I used since 2015, and Calamari, the new tool that I became aware of last year. In this slide, you see the just mentioned comparison with Ocropus in blue and Calamari in green, grouped by font, and the name of the fonts are at the bottom. With Ocropus, the percentage of character recognized correctly is well above 97, rather close to 98%, and in one case even over 99%. With Calamari, however, it is even higher, closer to 99%, or even above. Or said in other words, the already low error rate of Ocropus of roughly 2% was halved by Calamari in all cases, except for CSS C3, in which it was reduced by almost 30%. How is this possible? Calamari is based on Ocropus and learns by training in the same way Ocropus does. Actually, the same files of training data can be used for both. But other than Ocropus, Calamari uses the power of plurality. The magic word is cross-fold training and confidence voting. These were introduced to Ocropus by a team around Christian Reul at the University of Würzburg. I show you an example from their paper to illustrate how this works. In cross-fold training, the data is split into chunks and several different models are trained independently of each other, but based on the same data. The predictions of each model not only supplies a character, but also a confidence value. That is, the model outputs a percentage of confidence that the character it predicts is correct. Take the snippet from a historical German print from the paper cited here. The E in Marien is degraded and causes some trouble for the recognition process. In the table below, you see the percentages of confidence that the 5 trained models named M1 to M5 here. So the percentages of confidence that these models output for this letter. The decision is to be made between C and E. In a simple majority vote, best 3 out of 5, the voting would output C, as you see here with the underline results, which are the highest. However, the software is more democratic in the sense that it takes the minority confidence values into account too. And in this case, see the right column, they sum up in a way that E wins, which is the correct output also for the human reader. The great recognition rates are one highlight of what the Coptic OCR project has achieved in the past year. At least I consider them to be a highlight. The other highlight follows now. There finally is an OCR solution with a graphical user interface that can be used with Coptic texts. It is the front end of a suite of tools, including Calamari OCR, and its name is OCR for All. It was developed by basically the same team from the University of Würzburg that also gave us Calamari. OCR for All was designed for digitization projects of early modern printings. That means books with a complex layout, including headers, margins, ecthetic letters, ornamental elements, and so on. in this respect, not at all unsimilar to our editions and manuscripts. So let's have a look at what parts of the OCR workflow are covered by OCR for all. As you can see, from pre-processing through recognition up to post-correction, every step is covered by this suite of tools. And the best thing is that it runs in your browser or in a virtual Linux machine. So no need to use the command line all the time. I will now briefly walk you through this interface so that you can get a visual impression of what working with OCR for all looks like. This is a screenshot from my browser in which you see the project overview with the different steps. Pre-processing, noise removal, which is despeckling, then line segmentation, and finally recognition. And on the right side, you see a list of page scans that I have loaded into the project folder. And for this demonstration, I have chosen 2 of them. When you click on settings below, you can adjust parameters for each step of the process. In particular, you can choose your OCR models down here. This is what you see in the screenshot. There are some preloaded models, the first 4, for fonts frequently used in early modern books, because this is the focus of the OCR for all project. And below the models named Aubert are the models trained with Calamari for the Coptic font that I called Aubert. In order to benefit from the voting process mentioned earlier, one should choose more than one model to perform the prediction. And after that, one hits the execute button, which is not part of this screenshot. And the OCR software Calamari that is integrated into OCR for all will work its magic. And this is what a preview of the recognition results looks like. If the image is large enough on your screen, you will see that this is from the edition of the Apophthegmata Patrum, which is printed in the Aubert font. With a recognition rate of almost 99%, the recognition results are almost flawless. However, if you want perfect results, you need to correct OCR errors, and this can be done in the last OCR for all element that I want to show to you. This is the post-correction tool implemented into OCR for all. It is called Larex, and it is loaded when you click on the post-correction button in the menu. It produces a line-by-line snippet, a view with a snippet from the original image file above and the editable OCR result below. With the help of these image zoom and text zoom buttons, these can be aligned almost perfectly, facilitating the spotting of errors as well as their correction. And on the right side, I believe this will probably be too small for you to see. I'm sorry about that, so please believe my description. This is the virtual keyboard, which is adaptable. I have equipped my virtual keyboard with characters for philological markup, especially brackets and footnote signs, that are missing in my Coptic Unicode keyboard layout, so that they are easily accessible in this virtual keyboard. Larex is not only a handy tool for post-correction, it can be used as a facilitator for normal transcription as well, even with binary images of manuscripts, which might be interesting for you if this is part of your own project workflow. Larex is also used in the OCR workflow in order to produce ground truth. In that case, of course, there wouldn't be any OCR predictions here. The editable lines would be empty and one would start transcribing. It can also be used to create a markup of the layout of the document, which I won't show to you here. But which can be practical if you want to tag different regions like header, margin, ornaments, and so on, and produce an XML file output. Lastly, for the output of the recognition process, you can choose between a plain text file or, as shown here, an XML file containing some layout information like the line coordinates, which have this tag coords here. It would be more complex if I had tagged the regions and the layout as well, but this was not interesting for my research question, so I skipped that. Besides the top-notch tools implemented and its handy user interface, OCR for All has also a good documentation in English and German, which is why I can recommend to you trying it out. And with this being said, I'm at the end of my talk, and I would just briefly like to mention some points about which I would like to discuss maybe in the discussion rounds later, which is the question of a repositorium for digital coptological contents, including my files, and an infrastructure in which all the great tools that we are producing could be run on remote servers so that people don't always have to install them locally. Because in the case of this OCR stuff, there are some hardware requirements which not every office computer will be able to, well, to fulfill. So it would be great if we could help users by running it on servers that are accessible online. And what I plan to do for Coptic OCR in the next time is improve the documentation, because I have not done so much about it and nothing is published yet. And of course, to spread the word in hands-on workshops like the one that was planned for the Coptic Congress, which is now not happening. So I'm planning to create video tutorials, for instance, so that people can have a look themselves at home alone, but I'm always willing to come visit you and show you how this works in a very practical way. Yeah, so thank you very much. I switch on my video again so that you can see me. And I think it's probably better if I stop the screen share so that we can see each other again. Yeah.
Thank you, Elisa. Perfect timing also.
Oh, great.
Impeccable. Right, I will be moderating questions, which you should put into the chat in order to avoid chaos, please. I have my own questions if nobody has any, but please feel free to type some. In the meantime, maybe I'll get started with the most important question. Where are these models available? Have you put them?
Yeah, yes. Later, I will post the DOI in the chat. Yeah, sorry, yeah. Well, how could I forget to include it in the presentation? Yes.
Please put it somewhere prominent on a website so people can find it also after the conference.
Yes.
The pre-trained models.
That is part of the documentation that I mean.
Thank you. All right, we have a question from Julian Bogdani about does the system learn from corrections made in lyrics?
Not directly, but of course you can use that as a new input for the next training process. I'm not aware that there's a possibility to modify the model that you have used for the very recognition process that produced this output, but you can use it to improve the models and to create a new, better one, well, as far as I know.
Thank you. Helene Wilbrink asks, thank you, Elisa. Are you or others also working on handwritten text recognition for Coptic?
Yeah,
for
this
example,
is
using Transcribus.
Yeah, this is, well, yes, so that will be a lengthy answer. I would like to start working on handwritten text recognition because I get this question a lot. And I think that the Describes team in Basel has done some work that will help us to manipulate the image files of manuscripts in a way that you can even start thinking about handwritten text recognition, because of course the state of the manuscript is the difficult thing about this, not so much the handwriting, at least not for literary texts. And Transcribus, I know it and I have tried it and I have several, well, my main issue with it was that they have a very strict copyright policy. And basically you promise that you are the copyright holder of the images on which you train, which we normally are not, which poses a real problem. Also, Transkribus is not free anymore. You have to pay a couple of cents per page, which can really sum up. So I'm not sure this should be done in a project that has funding, and Coptic OCR has none. But I'm very interested in the question, and actually I have discussed with So and with Marco Büchler, who was my PI in Göttingen, the question of asking for funding and going in the direction of HTR, so handwritten text recognition, was one of the points that we addressed. Yeah, so I'm willing. If anyone else is willing, please let me know.
Yeah, we have actually some texts that have manuscripts that are digitized, so you could potentially get training data for that.
Hmm.
Now a question from So. He asks about text mixing in Coptic, Greek, and Latin alphabets. What happens when you have mixed scripts?
Yeah, well, as so far I have only worked with literary manuscripts, I didn't have the problem. But of course, once you start the documentary text, this will become an issue. Yeah, I don't think it's much of a problem, because you could load models for Latin and Greek and Coptic into OCR. You can also create mixed models for several languages. Yeah, it has just not been my focus, but I think the results would still be good, although one needs the right amount of training data. Then if there is too little Greek or too little Latin, the results for these languages will not be as good as for Coptic. So again, the selection of training data is important and yeah, needs a lot of thinking.
Do you know if it has some optimal path decoding, like a CRF layer or something? Because I'm thinking an Omicron, the problem is that an O and an Omicron look identical, but in Unicode, they are not the same. So it really depends on getting, oh, this is a bunch of Greek.
Yeah, maybe it has to be combined with some kind of language detection then to disambiguate. I don't know. Yeah, that's something one. Yeah.
Helene is saying also that she has worked on Transkribus for Dutch archives from the 18th century. So
yes,
that there are precedents. Yeah, thanks, Tim. So I have a question about the scripts. So from the text that you had there, it sounds like that was the Shen's edition of the AP, right?
yes.
Did you rescan that, or is that the terrible PDF that's out there?
Well, let me think about. I know that I rescanned some, but
Because
I
that's
would.
very impressive. The quality that in that thing, I sometimes with my eyes can't tell apart a pi from like any of the other letters that have two legs.
Yes. Well, this is. I put a lot of effort into pre-processing, I must say, and I took like 2 minutes per page for pre-processing, which doesn't sound a lot, but is very annoying when you do it for days. And compared to typing the whole text, that takes me 11 minutes per text page, and the pre-processing takes 2. So the time gain is largely modified by the amount of time that you put into pre-processing. And I use a tool I have not talked about today called ScanTailor, and you can adjust the thickness of the letter shapes, and that sometimes helps with bad scans.
I've had some bad experiences with more complex layouting in editions. For example, Shasina's edition of Shenute, which is also out of copyright and could be put up there right now, has things like Knute with an Omicron and an Upsilon like stacked and stuff like that, which I guess you could train as a separate. Yeah,
that is a problem, because also in line segmentation, this might be cut in the wrong way. The same for ecthetic letters. I haven't solved that so far. You could probably do that in the pre-processing with LaRex when you do a very detailed layout analysis and you really mark that this line has how do you say that? I don't even know, that this line has a letter that is below the normal text line or above the normal text line. You can mark it there, but this will take amounts of time that I think you could rather add this information in post correction instead.
Thank you. Malte Rosen is saying Kraken, on which Calamari is based, also has support for multi-script recognition.
Yes, I have never used Kraken myself, but yes, that was also an improvement on Octopus already. And yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, so all these OCR tools have these octopus-based names. It is not that is not a coincidence. They do that on purpose.
Well, there's only so many words that start with okra for OCR. So, all right. Let me thank Elisa again and everyone.
Yeah, thank you for this
very interesting talk.
opportunity.
And with that, we'll set up for the next talk, which is going to be by Paula Busi and Julian Bogdani on the PATHS project, our achieved results and new perspectives. So let me give you screen sharing permission. Who's presenting, Paula or Julian? Paula, okay. All right, Paula, you should be able to unmute yourself and share your own.
Yes, I think you can hear me, but it seems that I cannot. Yes, now I can share.
Thank you.
I hope you see the presentation. Do you see it? Okay, perfect. So first of all, hello, everybody. It's an emotion to be at the same time in so many places and to meet you all. So in the next few minutes, Julian and I will try to summarize what we have done within the PAPS project in the last almost 4 years, but at the same time to illustrate to you the next steps that we would like to do. I'm sure there is no need to recall that PAPS is a brief form, not in fact an acronym, of a much longer title, which contains in itself all the goals of the project. Basically, to connect concretely manuscripts and places, manuscripts and archaeology. PAPS is a project that has been funded by the European Research Council for 6 years, for the first 6 years of life. But I would like to stress it has been conceived to be a very stable, long-lasting, and easily maintainable web platform. So we will not disappear in the future. We plan to last for a long time, and it is hosted at Sapienza University. So the idea is to investigate the relationship between places as revealed by the archaeological sites and by archaeological investigation and the intellectual products. In this specific case, Coptic literary manuscripts. We can say that the theoretical concept which is behind the project, at the same time a sort of motto of the project itself, is manuscripts belong to archaeology. This is also a quotation from an article that you can see is not very recent, but still very valuable in my opinion, and I would like to suggest you to read it. Why manuscripts belong to archaeology? Because they are archaeological objects themselves, and sometimes one forgets it. They are complex artifacts with their own internal stratigraphy. And of course, archaeology is necessary. Even when a site did not restitute manuscripts, it is important for the reconstruction of the cultural landscape in which Coptic literature has been created. So we have tried in the last 4 years to describe, to represent a geography of Coptic literary production. What do we have in our database? We have all that you see listed here. Basically, more than 6,000 codicological units. Of course, we started our work on the shoulders of the CMCL project, We continue to update our data. The number is not, the figures that you see here are not stable because fortunately manuscripts come out from archaeological excavations continuously, and fragments located in different institutions may turn out to belong to one codicological unit. So it's a continuous balance to recreate in a way. Places. These first two sections are probably the most important ones because they are in strict relation. 72 of them are strictly related to the production, storage, or discovery of manuscripts. But as you can see, we have dealt with much more sites. Again, on several occasions, we have explained our choice. It's not a paradox. We cannot exclude Bowit because no manuscripts, at least not certain manuscripts, do not come from there. And of course, works, authors, titles, and colophons. The addition of titles and colophons is searchable, of course. And the most recent achievement of the database is a prosopography of the characters mentioned in colophons. We believe that it is useful. As we hope it is useful. This is how our database appears. The atlas is the user-friendly output of our database. You can see here all the sections it is composed of. In green, the most recent, as I said. And you can browse the atlas or you can go through the places section. For instance, if you want to know something about the manuscripts from Fantou or related to Fantou. Moreover, in both cases, you arrive here, so you realize that there are more than 100, and then you can have a detailed codicological description for each of them. Of course, not all the 6,000 manuscripts included in our database are so well described. It takes time, it takes years, but at least they are there, and basic information are already present. Moreover, in order to help users who are not Coptologists, we have created a series of saved queries, so to say, so prepared searches. For instance, let's imagine that you are interested in the so-called minor dialects. You find it out that they are about 60. You can again open each of these fishes and get the codicological description, or you can go, you can decide to view on the map all of them, and you obtain what you are seeing now, several dots in different colors, because the legenda of the marker symbols explains that different colors correspond to different typologies of places. So in the first almost 4 years, we have worked hard in order to have more or less under control the Coptic literary manuscripts and their physical dimension, so to say, geographical dimension. At this point, this work, of course, will continue in the next year and represents the core, the most important part of the project. Projects like these are destined to be continuously updated. This is normal. But at the same time, we realized that we obtained a tool that did not exist before, the atlas itself. That is why we decided to use our energies and the skills of the team members of the PAPS project to develop new products. And the Atlas became, in a way, the focus of these new activities. And this is what Julian is going to explain to you. We decided to dedicate more time to what is new, because most of you already know, at least in part, what PAPS has been until now. So now the new perspectives, and I leave the floor to Julian. I stop sharing.
Hello, thank you. So I'll go and share my screen. So I'll take where Paula left. Okay. The new perspective. So can you see the presentation? Okay, very good. So I'll talk now about some new things that we have been working on in the last months, and some new things that we're still working on and we have not published yet. These are not strictly related to text and Coptic because, as Paula said, the atlas is already there and it explains itself, but I'm just showing you a list of some new research directions and products and data that we want to share with the broader community that we are using in the atlas itself, but also that we offer as open data to a broader community. So first of all, many of you probably who have seen the atlas knows about the work that we have been doing in the last months on the historical maps. These are a very important source of information from the geographic domain, but not only, also for the reconstruction of the landscape, or Egyptian landscape. So we've been dealing with several editions of maps related to the Egyptian and Nubian area. So we've been georeferencing these and publishing as XYZ free tiled web map service online. Up to now, as you can see in the atlas, these are already published. You can already use this in our atlas and elsewhere, as you'll see. We have published this map of the delta area of the 8007 from, and the most important, of course, is the map drawn up by the savants of the Egyptian of the Napoleonic expedition to Egypt. It dates back to the last years of the 18th century. It was published in 1880. It is a very important source of information because it represents a state of the territory that is much more similar to the ancient time that it can be seen today. The methodology that we used in digitizing and in publishing this map, we have already published. Here is the bibliographical report, so you can check. Many important and interesting problems are related to that map. Other base maps that we have been dealing with are base maps compiled by the British or American forces, published between the 40s, the 50s, and also up to the 70s. These are different scales, different coverages. Each one of these documents some important information on Egypt itself. But the most important base map that I want to share with you today is this one. It's Atlas of Egypt, published on 1907 from the Ministry of Finance of Egypt, but of course with help from the British government. It is a 1 to 50,000 scale, and it is up to now the most precise and defined map that we have of Egypt before the construction of the High Dam and the creation of Lake Nasser. So we have been working for this for some weeks. We have finished georeferencing, and we are going to publish this on our atlas and of course website, so you can use and reuse this in the next few weeks. Here, the philosophy that stands behind our action is this one. We have one database with many outputs. We have invested in creating a very centralized database and data sets, and getting data from this central source in many different formats, in many different structures, etc. What do I mean? Everybody of you probably know of our web database available online under protected access, of course, at least for as regards writing and deleting. But we have been developing an application programming interface which works on the REST architecture and exposes JSON. This interface is the fuel of our database. our atlas. The atlas gets the data from this REST API, and of course of other web applications that we are publishing or joking with in this period. We are doing many experiments, as I will see. Some of them are just funny, some of them opens new perspective on the research that we are doing. And of course, we use the same, let's say, door to our database for our desktop application, of course, GIS systems, etc. It is free and it can be used also from your application, be them web-based or desktop-based. So you get to go through the documentation, learn about it, but of course you can use it. It is free. Next, we are working and investing many resources on what we call this managed data service. I mean, projects or people who are not interested in learning how our API works, but just want to get data, structured data, meeting their schemata. Well, they can talk to us. We create this kind of middleware that is published here, and they get data in the format they want. It should be an open format, of course, and following the schema that they want. We are using this this function, for example, to communicate with Trismegistos. We have worked on managed data service that exposes data customly tailored on Trismegistos needs. These are talking on JSON, but of course we also export data to use to export data to Pleiades, or also once again your application. While the REST API is tied to the JSON format, we can manage to export different formats, CSV, RDF, XML, JSON, etc., and different schemas through this thin layer, this middleware in between. As I told you, we've been experimenting on different kind of data visualization tools, data analysis tools, etc. I want to share with you this simple link. It is just a very simple one-page web application hosted on GitHub. This is the URL. As you can see, we are using here our API to get data from our central dataset about manuscripts that we call wandering manuscripts. These are manuscripts that has been produced in one place and that we know that have been found in another place or that have been stored in another place. Sometimes Colophon says that to us. When a manuscript has different places connected to, then this is called a wandering manuscript. That these maps here shows the travels that these manuscripts have done. It's pretty simple. Here's the legend. So you can see different strokes and different colors give different quantities. For example, as you can see here, the travels from the production center of Touton to the discovery center of Hamuli and also to the White Monastery. Well, as I said, this is just an example of what can be done with structured data. The most important thing is, the most important limit here is fantasy, of course, because as we'll see, we are sharing a very articulate structured data. To help users and to help also future us to get through this, paths is becoming a very complex data set. We're working on this open access data repository. We're trying to document each step of our work. So we have been publishing this new website, which is docs.paths-erc.eu, where we are publishing metadata. We're publishing handbooks, user handbooks, database schema, data repository, etc. For each entity of our database, you'll find a thorough description, very detailed, for each section, for each field, etc., with a link to the database name and also a thorough description, verbose description on what type of data we put inside each of these fields. You can see this is a very small part of the manual for the codicological units. It is about 200 fields, so it is very, very complex actually. And of course, we're publishing here in this portal for the techies. We're publishing also the schemata of our database. So if you want, you can copy, paste, download, and reproduce, and also build a database schema which is very similar or equals to the paths one, in order to better comprehend how this is working. Of course, all other data sets which are not structured data, for example, maps, tables, or other typology, vector files, etc. These are published in the data repository, which can be found at the same URL. Actually, we're publishing about 20 data sets, but this is going to change in the near future. We've been doing also a huge work on this new vector database. What is this about? This is about vectorizing maps of buildings of Christian related to Christian cult. It might be small churches, big churches, or basilicas, etc., or even private houses that have been known to have been linked to Christianity, etc. And we are putting this data on the web, and also getting this data inside our database. When you go and check one of these places that have been published, you will find, if available, these maps in different colors. Different colors are different semantics. It means different phases sometimes. It means different sources of information other times. This is an example, for example, from Abu Mina, where the Great Basilica, in different colors, as you can see here. You can see the different phases of construction where the data is available. Of course, this visualization tool is available in 2 dimensions or in 3 dimensions. These are just open data that we have been putting on our atlas, but we still need to work and go through this, because we want to put that together and make some site scale data for the most complex site at least, and publish this into our atlas. Finally, taking advantage of the work that we've done on the Napoleonic cartography, we're planning with younger collaborators to make a linked gazetteer of this Napoleonic map. So we are digitizing all places that are represented in these maps, and we are annotating toponyms written in the French form by the Napoleonic savants, but also transcription of the Arabic label when available. This will be a linked gazetteer, because we're planning afterwards to link each place, when possible, of course, to geonames, in order to have a georeferenced and linked gazetteer of this end of 18th century important map. Not only places, of course, but also other features are going to be vectorized. We'll work on hydrography, we'll work on roading system, we'll work on other natural or cultural features in a sort of backward engineering of this map, and trying to make an historical geographical information system of this 18th century map, in order to publish all this information with a broader community. Finally, this is very, very experimental. We're working in a connection graph of all places that we have up to now considered. This is just a preview of what we're doing. This is a very not mature work, a connection graph that uses, of course, the Nile and its main branches as sort of highways of communication, but also direct links between sites. In our mind, this would be something like that. This is a link that is currently working, but the data behind is still very rough. It can't be used, actually. But it's just a sort of preview of what can be done. This is a calculation, on the fly calculation of directions between different paths places, in order to better visualize on a map the connection that single places have with them, and also in the future place in these routes also text, manuscripts, and literary works. You can check, of course, this link, but as I said, this is just a very rough proof of concept. Well, I'm closing here. You, of course, know probably our context, the website, the atlas, the documentation portal that I tried very fastly to introduce today, And of course, the GitHub repository where everything is being published in real time. Thank you.
Thank you to Julian and Paula. See a lot of virtual clapping. All right, I'm going to start moderating questions from the chat. Maxim Kupreyev is asking, would it be possible to import Paths Places section into the comprehensive Coptic lexicon from copticdictionary.org or its TEI XML edition? And a second question, how up to date is the data on Atlas Paths erc.eu/API?
So I start from the second question. The data that you get through our API or that you get in the Atlas, it's live data. So what we have in the database is what you see. It's just live data. Yes, in either a second of difference, of course, because the same database that empowers our administrative backend, let's say so, it's the same that publishes data on the Atlas and all the other resources that I've described. So one source of information. And if it's possible to import, yes, we are publishing information about sites, be them geographical information, coordinates, etc., but also toponyms, description, etc., in real time. So you can of course import them as a JSON or GeoJSON or whatever, or CSV, etc., and process as you wish.
I'm trying to understand what's going on in the chat. I think it's Maxim still adding, note, pay attention, the live version must not be used for production use. Yes. Please refer to the GitHub hosted version. Yes,
this is not to overload our server, but it's just a technical issue. It's not, of course, because if you build an application that uses 3 times the resources that uses ours, maybe you get banned, but it's just an overload issue. It's not a, that's the reason of the warning. Of course, we are publishing a static file version on GitHub that is being updated on a monthly basis. If you want, you can point at that. It's, if you don't mind to have very fresh data, it's the same.
All right, so now we have a question from Fadi Rafat saying that there are different IDs throughout Trismegistos, Pleiades, and Paths, and suggesting to unify the ID to be one ID for each place. So, I mean, this is a perennial issue of the different identifiers used by different projects. Do you have anything to say about that?
Well, different policies about description. I mean, the focus that Pleiades, that Trismegistos have on places is quite different from our focus on places. And the same can be said of Pleiades. Each one has its own needs, so it produces its own identifiers. The important thing is to put them together and give the entire map. Paula maybe wanted to add something.
Yes, may I just add something? Let's make the case of Western Thebes. There is only one physical dot elaborated by Trismegistos for the entire Western Thebes, because as Julian said, the goals, the purposes of that project are others. In our cases, if you visit our database, you will see that each housing unit, each monastery, each hermitage has coordinates. So it's a different level of detail. And this does not mean, of course, that we are better than others. It's simply that our interest is different from Trismegistos one or somebody else. But what it is important, as Julian said, is to be, of course, coordinated.
Yes, thank you. Peter Diels is asking, are you aware of the archaeological atlas by Darcy recently published under supervision of Nicolas Grimal at the Collège de France?
Yes, I am aware, but it's a different product, simply. And please do not forget that the main goal of the of PAPs will remain dealing with manuscripts in their geographical context. What we have described today is an additamentum, is something more, is something else, is an improvement of the output of the atlas, but we are not geographers, and our main interest remains in manuscripts.
I see. We have a question by Mahmoud Amar, who's asking, what about papyrus and parchment, which are stored in antiquity storages and not published yet?
We try to obtain information as much as possible. As everybody knows, it's not always easy. So some of them are already in our database in a very chaotic form, and some others are not. They will be added as soon as it is possible.
I'll use a lull to ask my own question. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about places and linking and stuff in my own talk as well. I think the situation for metadata linking has gotten really, really good. So you guys know what all of your things are in Trismegistos and what they are in Pleiades, and there's a very good ecosystem of metadata. I'd like to push a little into occurrences of things in texts. How interested are you in that, you know, being able to have the same system of identifiers or talking about not just where a text was found, but find me all texts that mention place X and things like that, where you have to get into the contents of the text. Is that something you're interested in?
Yes, of course. This is what Agostino Soldati has done with colophons. So colophons have been edited, but then places have been tagged. And if you visit that section, you will see that we have tried really, Agostino in this specific case, has tried to really to obtain as much information as possible. So we do not have corpora of text, as you know, only titles and colophons. Colophons are much richer in providing this kind of information.
Yeah, Julian just posted the link to the colophons on the
colophon number one.
chat.
It's just an example, yes.
Yeah. I would like to say we are also very interested in this. As you know, our situation is more or less the opposite. We're very interested in the text of works, less so, we have dealt less with things like colophons, and we have much less metadata. So we're very interested in this. We should stay in the conversation.
And since we are filing different variants of place names, it would be interesting to enrich our database with other occurrences of variants that are not actually mentioned. Maybe they're found in tags that we have not considered yet. It would be probably easier in the future to automate also the recognition of occurrences of place names.
Yeah, we should talk about this definitely later in the discussion. One last question from YouTube, and then we should break. Here, So is also posting it to the Zoom chat from Hoda Kamal, thanking you guys and saying she liked the presentation and would like to ask if you use GIS in this project.
Julian.
Yes, of course. On our local system, we're using GIS, and the Atlas is just an introduction, a translation of the desktop GIS system on the web.
Excellent. Okay, we're scheduled to take a 10-minute break now. We will resume 10 minutes from now, wherever you are. So please take this opportunity to refresh yourselves, get a snack, and I will see you in 10 minutes. All right, welcome back, everyone. I believe we have Frank now. Let me set up the permissions.
Yes, it's Frank.
So can you hear me?
I can hear you now, Frank, and you should be getting
but
permission
when
to
else?
share your screen as well. So for our next talk, we have, according to the program, Frank Feder, talking about the digital edition of the Coptic Old Testament with his progress report. There's also a newsletter linked from the conference program if you want to read more about the project. So without further delay, Frank, take it away.
Yeah. Well, here comes some.
You should be able to share your screen if you have slides.
Yeah. So
Actually,
thank you for
so, before I start, I'm confused things. So you're hosting this session because there's also my talk.
Sure.
okay.
So is chairing this session.
I'm a chair. Okay, great. So yeah, so Frank, yeah, the first speaker of this session is Frank Feder, and his talk is the digital edition of the Coptic Old Testament, a progress report. As Amir said, there's a newsletter link on the homepage. So Frank, the floor is yours.
Yeah, right. Thank you for this fantastic opportunity to join so many people. I have seen. Oh, no, it's only 62. It has been 66. I hope it's not because of me. Yeah, I hope you had the opportunity to look into our newsletter, which we posted with the program, or the organizers did. So describing a little bit all the efforts we made to reconstruct as you all know, widely dispersed manuscript fragments of the Coptic, not only the Old Testament, what is our task, but also Coptic literature in general. So instead of showing you screenshots, I hope this works here, that everyone can see this. I will try a live presentation. Is this visible?
Not yet.
What do I have to do?
Yeah, you are co-host now, so you should be able to share the screen. You cannot. Could you press the green button, share screen? But you're doing that.
So do you see my screen anyway?
Not yet. Amir, do you know the solution? No?
Can you see the green share screen button at the bottom of your screen? At the bottom of your
Right.
Zoom?
I did already. You hadn't. Okay. Here we go. So there comes some security.
Oh, you are using a Mac, maybe?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe you have to permit the broadcasting or something on the settings of Mac, probably.
And where would this be? I don't know.
I mean, all right. Wait a minute. Then I can show you my screen how to do it.
Malte is saying Systemeinstellungen, Sicherheit, Privatsphäre.
Yeah, that's
I will
yeah,
try
yeah.
this.
No.
Wait. I can't find this. Okay. And then?
And now if it's on, you should be able to use the green shared screen button at the bottom of your Zoom.
Please try it again.
Malte is adding that in Systemeinstellungen, Sicherheit, Privatsphäre, you will find Bedienungshilfen in which you will have to allow Zoom.
All right.
Look for Bedienungshilfen.
There's something about an AE server. So I don't see this, sorry.
I guess the alternative is for you to email us the slides and tell us to click forward. I can do that if you email me the slides.
Wait, I don't have slides. I wanted to show you the browser.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I'm. It is not possible for some reason. I don't know why I can't show my screen.
So wait a minute.
Should we reorder the talks, put another, oh, here, wait, we're seeing your screen.
Okay, here we go. Sorry, was
Yay.
my fault. So I'm not so experienced with Zoom yet. Do you see this here?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry for this. Yeah, for the slight delay. Yeah, this is always the problem if you want to show something live. Yeah, many of you, or if not all of you, should know our virtual manuscript room, what we actually share with our colleagues of the New Testament project at Münster. Our work is dedicated to the digital edition and translation of the Coptic Old Testament. That means especially the Sahidic Old Testament. So if you had the opportunity to read the newsletter, as I started talking about, you have an idea about the effort we have to make to get all these dispersed fragments together from all over the world. We just count, and I don't speak of private collections, 110 different collections which own fragments not only of the Coptic Bible, but also of Coptic literature. Our workflow is just on our website. I invite you to visit our website to see all these things. That we start, of course, that has been our main focus the last 5 years. We started in 2015, cataloging the manuscripts, image processing, indexing biblical content, standardization of variants, collation of witnesses, transcribing, and then we go over, this is the final product, to a critical apparatus and a digital print edition. Of course, this is still something to come in the future. We also, as you see, advertised our workshop on our website. If you want to know what's always interesting, more about ongoing, especially reconstruction of manuscripts, observations, working with manuscripts, I can recommend to read our blog posts on different things. There are some very interesting reports on reconstructing manuscript scratches from different collections. Of course, you know what we did together with other partners. All of them are with us now. The Coptic Dictionary Online, we will hear about this. We have, thanks to Malte Rosenau, a wonderful scan of Crumb's Coptic Dictionary. And I wanted to check at the next opportunity. We have a growing Coptic Bible bibliography, which is also connected to Zotero database searches. And the main thing what we are doing, of course, is visible if you go to the bottom with the manuscripts. We have the manuscript catalog, the workspace, and some tools of indexing and describing that, which of course are important for us, for our team. And what we entered now as a new phase of our project work is the systematic production of diplomatic editions of the Coptic biblical manuscripts. This all has the goal, of course, to record in the virtual manuscript room. The best thing would be I show you. If you go in our manuscript catalog to a certain manuscript, for example, our number, this you have seen also in the fantastic presentation by Julian and Paola. The LCBM numbers is the list of Coptic biblical manuscripts. These are numbers, the New Testament project, and we use these numbers replace Schussler's Biblica Coptica numbers. So that means this is together the Schmitz-Mink-Richter counting of manuscripts with our Coptic Old Testament numbers. So the 2006 manuscript is one of the famous Hamuli manuscripts, and you find here the metadata and a short sample of how the manuscript looks like, the content of the manuscript, where it comes from, and of course what's important, and you see here immediately the result of a cooperation. We can link here with the ID to the PASS project, and you can go directly to the page of the PASS project and see the data to this manuscript. And of course, use all these fantastic services to locate. If you don't know where Hamuli Fanto is located in the Fayum Oasis, you can do this via PASS. We usually also add the Trismegistus numbers, but this is a kind of a double service, but because if you follow the PASS ID numbers, then you automatically get, of course, if you switch to PASS, the Trismegistus numbers. We still have to work with the guys from Trismegistus because not all the data we try to update all the time to have the most actual metadata for the manuscripts. They are sometimes not all up to date. For example, in Trismegistus, sometimes the present location is still the British Museum, although most Coptic manuscripts were transferred to the British Library in the 1970s. Yeah, only to give an example. So this, of course, you can explore yourself. And that's what all is about is, of course, the manuscript itself. So we have the display with ideally a high resolution color image of each manuscript page. Of course, recto, verso, or the flesh and hair sides. And you always see where the page in question is located. This is a lucky case here. We have much more difficult cases. I can't show this all. You can easily imagine we have manuscripts from the White Monastery. This is from Hamuli, as I said, with 11, 12 different locations. And you will see, as it is here, at any time where the single leaf is located. And this is combined with a transcription of the page content here. And as the virtual manuscript room all the time, of course, records these transcription data in an XML standard format. This, of course, can be exported at any different format. And of course, the images, the manuscript numbers, and also the transcriptions can be connected via APIs. Sorry. And if we have recorded, ideally, all the manuscripts that are available and of course put into the virtual manuscript room, then we can create an edition. And this is still very much a work in progress. I can only show you a short glimpse of it. What we produced recently for Psalm 90, how it looks like, because we can, of course, half automatically made the virtual manuscript room collate the content, the transcription content of every manuscript that has been completely indexed and transcribed in the virtual manuscript room. We can make the collate engine that was developed by the Kompetenzzentrum at Trier in Germany, and is used by the different virtual manuscript rooms or by other projects too. Amir knows this well, I suppose. This is the basis here, and it has to, of course, to be trained to use Coptic to a bit. And you see here the apparatus with the variant readings. The Psalter is one of the best transmitted books of the Coptic Bible, besides the Gospel manuscripts. So we have a lot of different readings of parallel witnesses. And if you go to the apparatus, only to give you an idea, we have here the translation in English and German. So this is still a thing that comes in the future, that will be the final result of our project. If we have recorded all, according to our work plan, all the manuscripts available of the different books of the Old Testament here in Sahidic. And here also we have, you can click on these witnesses and you get, oh no, this is in Lacuna, sorry, that is of course wrong. And you get this passage in question that is discussed in the apparatus as a display on the right-hand side here. Well, I can only invite you to use this. Of course, the manuscript catalog, we just have started to completely edit the manuscripts in diplomatic editions. And if you browse through our list, of course, many manuscripts are still not available. To explain this here to you, there's an article linked here under this standardized system for naming Coptic biblical codices. It just appeared in the last volume of the Journal of Coptic Studies, so everyone can read it if you have it, or you just click here and see the article there. It's an explanation by Siegfried Richter and myself to understand the manuscript numbering according to this list of Coptic biblical manuscripts. So, and then you understand that in our list, all the numbers below 2000 belong to lectionaries or the New Testament, and all manuscripts above 2000 are reserved for the Coptic Old Testament. It means this is our special responsibility. Yeah, and then you will find, of course, also manuscripts that are not completely edited diplomatically. We have already these so-called Hamuli manuscripts, the Kingdom manuscripts. These are mostly in New York in the Morgan Library and Museum, with the metadata and also the links, as I showed you, with giving also the different identifiers, like Biblia Coptica, if you want to compare this, or the Isaiah manuscript also in the Morgan Library. And you can already see a complete set of images and transcription. This won't be the case with all our manuscripts, but of course, this is a difficult task that takes a lot of time. And it's, of course, a lucky case to have such manuscripts like those I showed briefly, which are in one place. The Isaiah manuscript is not in one place. There are some pages in Berlin, some leaves in Berlin, and some still in the Coptic Museum in Cairo. But as you all know, the usual cases with the White Monastery manuscripts, that you will have 7, 8, 10 different collections, and even sometimes pieces are which still fit together are in one city, in London or Paris, for example. Yeah. All right, this is a short introduction into what we are actually doing. So the progress is that we are really displaying already diplomatic editions. We are working on a model of critical edition, taking into account all the manuscript data we record here. And what's of course very important, to work with all you guys together, and especially with PARS and the Coptic Dictionary, the Berlin project, and Amir and Carrie's Coptic Scriptorium, because the Old Testament text files we use, we can upload them from our so-called base text. What we use to transcribe the pages is also provided to Amir and Carrie's Scriptorium for the Old Testament texts, which are linguistically tagged and analyzed for us. So thank you so much for your attention. I hope this was somehow instructive, and I apologize for the problems. Yeah, we are at the threshold of a new era, as it looks like, with all this Zoom. Usually we should gaze in a conference room. So I'm maybe not yet of the oldest generation, but I feel, and this is what my kids tell me, I feel a bit old if I see that I have still problems with it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for your wonderful talk, Frank. That's also very great to know the big progress of the Coptic Old Testament project. Yeah, we have to get used to the new technology. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it is very odd that we have to make an online workshop, but yeah, it's the time to do it, and maybe it will make our it will make the good progress in our society. So do you have any questions? If you have a question, please, from Elise Sophia Link. She's asking, as for the integration with Coptic Scriptorium, is all Old Testament data in Coptic Scriptorium from the Copt.ot project, i.e. that is it citable as such?
Yeah, this is, as I just said, it is the data of our so-called base text. So the base text is all what we could gather from publications, from personal transcriptions from us, from our team, from collaborators, from former project initiatives. Actually, what we still have to do is, this is somehow the content of the so-called Sahidic Bible on Crosswire. So this is the New Testament and the Old Testament. We are regularly updating the Old Testament data, and our colleagues from the New Testament update, of course, the New Testament data. This is still, you find it still under the name Askeland Schulz, the Sahidic Bible. So we have to update this. Christian Askeland and I and Troy Griffiths have to do this. We will do this year, definitely, to have a Sahidic Bible version 2.0. Elise, you understand? And so it's there. Amir can upload our base text data directly, but it's right, the Sahidic Bible that you find on the internet, the Crosswire page, has to be updated and versionized. Yeah, this is something that will come. Huh?
Maybe I can add a few words about the differences between the Copdot version and the scriptorium version, because some people might be using them. The scriptorium version, most of it is automatically processed, which means that unless you're looking at the original layer, what Coptic scriptorium gives you by default is the normalized edition. This means that nomina sacra are expanded automatically. This means that bound group separation is normalized automatically. And sometimes these things have errors. I should say we are improving the quality of our Old Testament data as well. And in fact, for the next release, we will have our first gold standard part of the Old Testament added, which if you're interested in linguistic analysis of the Old Testament is interesting. We're including as a first text with complete manual correction of all syntactic analyses, the Book of Ruth. So this is going to be coming out in our next release, and the quality of the automatic analyses is improving all the time. But if you want to actually see the unmodified base text, you should look at the layer of annotation that we call orig, which is the original form, while the normalized form, which is what we display by default, is whatever our tools output, which facilitates searching for things so that you have the same expansions for all nomina sacra and other irregular spellings.
And we are, of course, improving these data all the time. So if we transcribe a manuscript, we can upload from base text. If there's text, there's still gaps in the Bible. As you know, the manuscript usually are not complete. And if we transcribe, we, of course, update and correct our base text data. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Frank. May I ask a question? I'm a fan of the New Testament virtual manuscript room, and I really like the collation visualization tool, CollateX. Do you also plan to implement CollateX on this Coptic Old Testament project?
We did. This is what I showed.
Already? Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean the visualization one, there's a node.
Yeah, of course we have this, but I haven't shown it. The basis for this, I showed this model for a critical edition. This is based on CollateX. Yeah. So this is, we just use it because it was not developed by us. Yeah. So it is implemented.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can now you can also visualize the.
Yeah, of course, this is a very nice thing, but it would have been too much to show this too here. Yeah.
Okay, I got it. Thank you. Does anyone have questions? And also, I also have a question. So you will also publish a critical edition based on these diplomatic editions, right? How will it be? How do you present the critical edition on your portal?
Yeah, this is still something we are working on. We have this test file I showed you from the Psalm 90. Yeah. Of course, the translation will be displayed differently. So basically, it will be a text with an apparatus, and these are interactive.
Okay.
If you have seen the model, you can click on the verse, you can click on the manuscript numbers, you can go back to the diplomatic edition of the manuscript in the virtual manuscript room. Depending on your interest, what you want to see, you can follow another, as in the Psalms, there's Mesochamic, Middle Egyptian version. You can, if you want to follow this, you can follow the variant readings. If this is your interest in dialectal variation, or this is what we still need to have a Greek text parallel to exactly compare where you can follow it in the apparatus, but then you could also check if you're a Septuagint scholar with knowledge of Coptic, you can directly check the Greek text and the Coptic where you have differences. But the edition, so as you know, is the final goal of the project. We first have to provide the manuscript data to transcribe the manuscripts before we can start the collation. But of course, we test this that we know how we will do it when it comes to the creation of the critical edition of the apparatus. Of course, there's also the possibility to print this out, to make a book of it, thanks to the XML standards we have. But yeah, the digital is of course the preferred image we have of this. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I also found a good image of the. Sorry, what happened? Can you see?
How it
Yeah,
looks.
yeah, it is from the Troy Griffiths website. This is a good visualization of CollateX. It is a visualization of the the data based on critical apparatus of the Greek Bible. Your project also will have this visualization, and I think it's very wonderful. And
Yeah.
Thank
This
you.
is behind, you can have different visualization of the process of data collating, of course.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that's promising and that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Frank. It's the
You're
time.
welcome.
It's the time of the second talk. Okay, wait a minute. Yeah. So yeah, the second talk of this session is it's from Coptic Scriptorium project. The speakers are Amir Zeldes and Caroline Schroeder, and their talk is exposing Coptic entities, automation, search, and visualization. Okay, floor is yours.
Thanks. So I'd also like to add Lance Martin, who's one of our co-authors on this work. I'm going to start sharing my screen. All right, you should be able to see my screen now. All right, can everybody see? Good. All right, so thank you for listening and for coming to the workshop. I'm going to be talking about Coptic entities today and how we can expose them for our users, including automating the process of being able to find entities in Coptic text, exposing them to search, and then visualizing the results. And this is joint work with Carrie Schroeder and Lance Martin from the Coptic Scriptorium project, which is funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities. I'll start by saying a few words about Coptic Scriptorium for those of you who don't know the project. Coptic Scriptorium is basically an online platform for open access research on Coptic, particularly focused on Coptic language and literature. So we are also very interested in metadata like the PATS project and the Coptic OT and all other projects working on manuscripts. But our focus is on the texts themselves and not just things like holophones, but really the content of Coptic literary works. We try to offer tools for working on Coptic. A lot of them target automatic analysis of Coptic language. And it's a very collaborative environment, so a lot of our tools are online. And in fact, if any of you are interested in contributing, have texts of your own, please contact us. We've gotten, a lot of our materials are from other projects, just like we have analyzed the Coptots project base text for the Coptic Old Testament. And some of them are texts that we edit ourselves, project members publish online. Today's focus is going to be on dealing with entities. This is a very interdisciplinary subject because we're looking at some computational linguistics aspects of noticing entities in texts and classifying them, which is kind of my field, but also philological interest in the entities that appear in texts. I'd like to thank some people who are not co-authors of this presentation, but were instrumental in getting this data out there. Sichang Tu, a grad student at Georgetown University who's working on the entity recognition modules. Mitchell Abrams, a former grad student at Georgetown as well. And Elizabeth Davidson, who's been collaborating with us on annotating entity information in texts. And this is the grant number that's been funding this work. All right, so I'll start by talking about what I mean by entities. Well, of course, texts talk about things, all sorts of things, people, places, other things. And some of these things are named, and I think that these are the type of entities that have received the most attention in the past. For example, Emperor Diocletian or Alexandria, right? So those are people and places. At the same time, a lot of really interesting entities in Coptic texts are not really named. So sometimes you could have an entire text revolve around a holy man, and he's never named, right? If you've worked on the apophthegmata, you know that large parts of it start, some old person was asked something, and then, you don't really have that named person, but you'd like to know that they're being mentioned and talked about. Similarly, for places, there are things like the desert. Sometimes you might have even an idea which desert that is, sometimes you don't. A monastery, a different monastery, and so on. So the focus of the work that we've been doing has really been on what I'd like to call more or less exhaustive entity annotation, which is talking about every single thing that is mentioned in a text, being able to index it, search for it, and also count it for quantitative analysis. In this talk, specifically, I'll refer to things that you can refer to as kind of the gold standard for what is an entity mention. One test that you can use for this is, can you refer back to it with a pronoun? This is sometimes a bit sketchy, and we've tried to err on the side of caution in including things. So some things you'd need to kind of stretch your imagination to be able to say whether or not they'll be referred back to with a pronoun. Let me maybe start with a negative example. So for example, something like af-ahirat, that rat, the leg of the person. So that's just a Coptic idiomatic way of saying he stood, or took a step, or placed his foot somewhere. But that foot is not referential. You probably would not be able to refer back to that foot and say it, right? You wouldn't say something like peirat afterwards. So instead of that, we focus on things that we think are referential or referring expressions. And still that includes the vast majority of nouns in text, because it's very difficult to rule out that something will be referred back to again. Another good criterion for identifying them is, except in very idiomatic circumstances, things that have an article. And very often these things will also contain other things that are mentioned with an article. For example, pistis hos and Katholike Ecclesia in this example, also the faith of the Catholic Church. It has pistis, which is faith. That's an entity because you can certainly refer back to it. I would say that's an abstract entity, not a person or a place. And then the Catholic Church, which is an organization in this context. And you would say that one entity contains the other type. Another way of calling this is to say these are nesting entities, or the Catholic Church is nested within the faith of the Catholic Church. So the main question that I'll be dealing with today is how we can expose these entities to users. So these entities are always there in the text, and you could have always searched for something like the Catholic Church just by entering those words. But we want to be able to delimit exactly where these things start and begin, how many of them appear in a text, and which types they have. So our goals are basically, first of all, to provide a data set that has this kind of annotation so that when people ask, well, how should I annotate it? I will say, like in this data set. Second of all, having such a data set will mean that we can train automatic tools to perform the same kind of analysis. So our first goal here is to provide a gold standard entity data set containing both named and non-named entities. A secondary goal is to link all those named entities to searchable stable identifiers. So this is a common denominator with a lot of the projects that we've seen today and we'll see tomorrow. People want to know what are all the ways in which Alexandria is referred to, where is it mentioned, and so on, regardless of the way in which it was mentioned. This means needing to unify things that refer to the same thing in some way. And finally, we'd like to make all of these types of analyses automatable because we can't feasibly manually annotate all of the text that we have in this fashion. So we'd like to make automatic tools based on this data in order to make that possible. All right, let me start with the data. This has been a lot of work that started in the Coptic tree bank that we released in 2018. The Coptic tree bank is a very exhaustively linguistically annotated resource, currently totaling 46,000 words, which contains entire syntactic analyses for all Coptic sentences in the dataset. It's balanced for a number of genres, including both translations and autochthonous works from different kinds of texts in order to have broad coverage. And after annotating it for entities, it turns out that it contains 6,500 entity mentions. So this is in fact a result. We didn't know before how many things are mentioned per 1,000 words of Coptic text. And now we have some sample to give an answer to that. We also can give a second answer since our data set includes also annotations for part of speech. And since we have separate parts of speech for proper nouns, we can say that about 10% of our entities are named. So 610 entities out of 6,500 approximately are named entities. However, not every named entity is what I would call identifiable. For example, there is, I'll give you just a completely random one. There is a a person called Bibros. He is mentioned in the Dormition of John. We don't exactly know who this person is. Maybe there are scholarly studies that can tell us more about where this person is mentioned in Christian hagiography. But so even though this person is named, I don't think there's any project out there that has given this person a stable identifier. And this can happen again and again. You have a documentary papyrus that mentions some Valerius. You know that it's a named entity, Valerius, but you don't know who this person is. So I will make a distinction between things that are named and things that are identifiable. Out of those 441 identifiable entities, we were able to find that they correspond to 104 unique Wikipedia articles. So at this point, you might raise an eyebrow and say, Wikipedia articles? What does that have to do with anything? In computational linguistics, it's quite common to use Wikipedia as a table of authorities for named entities. Some people call this wikification. And in the discussion section today, and maybe tomorrow, I'm happy to talk more to people about identifiers. One of the commenters today pointed out that different projects have different identifiers. Well, one of the common denominators that a lot of projects have is that if there is a Wikipedia article for the entities that they encode, they include that as well. So for example, Pleiades has its own identifier for Alexandria. Of course it does. So does Syriaca.org, which is not dealing with Coptic materials at all. However, both of these resources also note the link on Wikipedia to Alexandria, which is how you can tell that it's the same one, because they both link to Alexandria, the city, on Wikipedia. This means that if we choose to use wiki links as our stable identifiers, we get a couple of advantages. The most obvious one is that we're able to align to other projects. As Paula indicated earlier, whatever system you choose, it's not going to be optimal to your project if it comes from another project. If you want to be able to align to all other projects, choosing a broad common denominator is maybe a good idea. Another problem with reusing the identifiers from other places is that they might be very specified for one area. For example, Pleiades has great IDs for places, but it doesn't cover people because it's a geographical gazetteer. And we want people, places, organizations, we want all of them to be under one system. Well, the advantage of Wikipedia is that it's exactly that. It has identifiers for noteworthy people, noteworthy places. And in any case, it makes a good starting point that is really very stable. And even if article names change in Wikipedia, actually all of those changes are tracked in Wikipedia itself. So you're able to automatically keep your table of authorities up to date. Finally, Wikipedia also includes geographical information such as coordinates for its place names, meaning that we can get for free any place that has an entry in Wikipedia with geo coordinates. We can actually associate those with entities linked to the Wikipedia article. Oh, and I think I skipped actually the most important one almost. If you have wiki links to your entities, you can allow users to read the Wikipedia article about the entity, right? So as they are reading a Coptic text and don't know who some person is, they can simply click on their wiki link. This is what it looks like in our new data set. So this is a new visualization that is being added to all Coptic scriptorium data sets, hopefully by the end of summer. In fact, let me show you this live. So what you're seeing here is, I guess this is the Gospel of Mark. And you're seeing some people that have been identified. As you can see, they have nesting. For example, one prophetess is one of the prophets. So one is nested within all the prophets, but they're not named, so you don't know who they are. By contrast, Elijah here is the prophet Elijah, and that is being linked to over here to the Wikipedia article. You can search for this data in our ANIS web interface, which some of you may know already. And this data is currently included for the Coptic tree bank. So if you go to the ANIS interface at this URL, which I will also, it's not, for some reason I went to the not HTTPS, you should use this. Let me post this link on the Zoom chat, and anyone who wants to try querying stuff can do that. If I can ever get back to the chat. And I'll show some example queries in a moment. You just need to select the Coptic tree bank and search for something. There are all sorts of query examples here. I'm just going to pick a random page. So this is the martyrdom of Victor the General, or an excerpt from it. And if you click on this, you'll notice that there's a variety of entities in there. And I don't know, here, this is an unusual one. Most time entities are not named, but Ebot Parmute is a Coptic month. And indeed, it's known as the Wikipedia entry Parmuti. And if you click on that, you'll end up at the Wikipedia entry, oh, what's a Parmuti? Well, let's click on Wikipedia and find out. So that's kind of the advantage of having these wiki links directly live in our texts. All right, so that's the entity visualization. I'm stuck in Zoom mode. All right, so what's included in this data set? As I've kind of alluded to already, more or less every nominal referring expression except for pronouns. So if it's a noun and it's describing a thing that's being referred to, then it's going to be included. There are 10 entity classes which we distinguish. Abstracts are the most common. They're things like thoughts or the concept of humility or anything like that. They're abstracts and they get this little cloud icon to indicate that they're not tangible. We distinguish animals. They're not super common, but some texts have a lot of animals in them if you're interested in that. That's mainly because we don't want to include them in the same category as persons, which have their own category. I should say that supernatural personas also fall into this category, so all the angels would also be a person entity in this context. Places, again, named and non-named, so Alexandria is a place and a mountain is also a place. Plants, events, concrete objects, including body parts, substances such as water or blood or anything else, organizations such as the King's Army or the Catholic Church, and time terms, which can be just 10 years, if you want to know durations that are being mentioned, or named months, for example, as well. In terms of searches, you can search for these exact entity types or also for entity identities. You can restrict your search to named and non-named entities. And because the data is completely syntactically annotated, you can search by head noun. So you can look for all entities headed by army, never mind if it's the army of the emperor or some other army. A part of speech, grammatical function, as well as Greek loanword status for other languages of origin. So if, for example, if you wanted to use the syntax here, there are some references here for how to use the query language, which I'm going to leave in the slides that you can also see in YouTube. But if you can't find something, feel free to contact us on how to find more complex things. For example, entity headed by part of speech article gives you entities in pet, right? Pet sotem, pentafmu, stuff like that. You can also search for the full text of entities with spaces between constituents. So text equals wildcard p space nute, any entity containing nute. You can search for nested entities. Here's people containing places. A person contains a place entity. Well, let me show you some of these. You can do things like entity equals person. And this operator I means includes an entity like a place. And I suppose we'll get several of these. So this is still displayed in bound groups. You can also make it displayed in segmented text. It's maybe a bit easier to read, or not actually for me. من ونيم et epikalim pran impinjois Jesus bechrisus him manim intau neman. So the manim is the place entity inside the person entity. That's why this location is being found. Similarly, you can look for the loan words. So for example, you can look for entities that include Greek language of origin, and you will get places with Greek in them, such as Korinthos or Kosmos. And you can also get entity breakdowns for those. So there's a frequency analysis, and you can see which ones exist. This is what it looks like in our annotation grid. If you open one of these search locations, if you're used to using ANIS from your experience with Coptic scriptorium, you can see all of these annotations and basically search for any constellations, including parts of speech, grammatical functions, and so on. All right, for the last part, I'm going to talk about the automation process and the levels of accuracy that we've been able to reach. We basically rely on our syntactic parser to identify entity boundaries. We've also tried using recurrent neural networks, but they have been less accurate with the amount of data we currently have. We do use machine learning classifiers for the entity types. And then we have a pretty coarse rule-based heuristic for doing the entity linking currently. So entity detection is based on syntax trees, as you see above. The system below is really just something that we compared and ends up being not as good. Our syntax trees have kind of arrows between words that constitute an entity. So for example, here you can see pkah, the land. Well, you can tell that they belong together because kah points to the p. And because this is a noun, you know that the entity is going to start at the article and end at the noun. Using this strategy, we get quite high performance, especially if you don't care about the exact entity boundaries. If you want perfect span match, then we have an accuracy that is a recall of about mid 80% and a precision of kind of low 80s%. This means that, say, for an automatic parse, not a gold parse tree, we have, say, 83% of actual entity spans are found by us, and 81% of the things that we say are entities actually are entities in terms of exact match. So that's the scenario C and above, where being right is only correct if you match exactly the entity size here. If you're willing to allow fuzzy match, meaning that you wouldn't consider it a mistake to have urome if shanuje and peftroch, is considered an okay match for urome, regardless of whether you should have included that conditional sentence in there. If you allow that, the accuracy is much higher and averages around 93%. So 93% of things that are supposed to be entities are found, including some shifted windows, and 93% of the things we say are entities actually are entities. In terms of type classification accuracy, I don't know if I have time to get into this in detail. We basically use a system that combines knowledge-based suggestions and a machine learning classifier which tries to disambiguate which one is the correct one. So for ambiguous terms like, say, yot, most people know that yot means father and should be a person. Some people also know that yot means barley, which is a plant. This is much more rare, but happens. And we have a classifier that tries to determine which is the correct answer. Using both the classifier and the knowledge base, we obtain an accuracy of about almost 82% if you want the exact match and entity type. If you're okay with fuzzy match, but the correct entity type, then we get almost 88%. Finally, for entity linking, we currently use a fairly simple heuristic, which basically says, if you've seen this exact entity name before, take the most frequently linked entity that it was linked to, ideally in this corpus, if not in any corpus. And then if that fails, take the entity headed by the same noun and assume that it's that one. That strategy will sometimes fail, especially if you've got names like, say, Johannes, could be John the Baptist, could be John the Evangelist, and you don't know which one it is. If you use this strategy, you get a coverage of about 50% of cases get an answer from the system, 50% we just don't know. And it almost never makes an error. So it makes an error in 4% of cases. It wrongly assumes that it's the more frequent John in this corpus, but actually it was the other John. Currently, we're just using it as a suggestion mechanism in our annotation workflow. So we use that. This is our annotation interface. Some of you may know this. We basically use our automatic tools to do linguistic analysis on this. This is just a made-up example. Appa Shenute stayed at the monster until the day of his death. That gets segmented first, because before you know where the words start and begin, you can't run entity recognition. And then, spurious line here. And then you do automatic entity recognition on that. And it will decide for itself where the entity spans are, hopefully correctly. So it decides that monasterion is a place, Poem Pefmu is a time containing an event, Appa Shenute is a person. And if you want to list the named entities, you can guess what they are, and it will say, oh, this is probably Shenute. Note that annotators actually have to confirm that they agree that it's Shenute. And if they don't agree, they can also select something else. Maybe I think this is Ephraim the Syrian. And it will suggest other entities to which we have Wikipedia links already in the database. We plan to include this also in our linked metadata. So currently, every text that has people or places mentioned in it has them separated in a list here. And those will show up in our document reader, some of which some of you might be familiar with it already. And we've also got some visualizations of this data online. So if you'd like to play with the entire data set, I encourage you to go to the link here. And you can play around with some of these plots. Some of them are just to see, what kinds of nouns head different types of entities. For example, here are all non-named places in the tree bank. So most of them are headed by ma, and then you can see, oh, it's Uma and Jaya 3 times for Pitten ma. There are also a couple of other visualizations that you can play with here. This one is kind of fun, and we were thinking it might be interesting to add to the Coptic dictionary. You can kind of look at different nouns and how they typically form entity terms. So this is ma, usually u, peck, or hen. And the width of the arrows is how often it continues to a different type. So it's almost always ma'in. Sometimes it's ma'it. Ma'it is she, the place which is appropriate. And if you want to do this yourselves, there's the automatic tools at Coptic NLP. You can search for Coptic NLP. You can download the tools on GitHub as well. And you can use our web interface, which basically offers all of these analysis here. So you can just input some text, hit process, and just make sure that entity recognition is enabled, and you'll be able to see syntax trees and entity annotations. Over here. So here are the entities, and here are the syntax trees that you can leaf through. And all of that is automatic and freely available. All right, with that, I'll end by saying that we plan to add these automatic analyses to all of our corpora, and like with our other automatic analyses, to update them periodically as the tools improve. This will be our first release of entity annotated data. The gold standard manually annotated tree bank with entities is already released on GitHub. We plan to manually correct entity linking for our core corpora, excluding the very large automatically annotated Bible corpora, because they're too large to handle right now. But all of our martyrologies, hagiography, we plan to do manually corrected entity linking. And we will make all of these tools available in the very near future. Right, that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Amir. It is great to know this big progress in implementation of entity recognition in Coptic scriptorium. I'm also very much impressed by this beautiful visualization of entities on the web interface. There are many questions. First, it's Arabic. Wait a minute. Asmahan Ab al-Assad. Asmahan Abu al-Assad. Yeah. Is this project similar to papyri.info?
It is in some ways, specifically in the fact that we offer full searchable texts, much like papyri.info. And in fact, we've collaborated with them a little bit. So we have some data from papyri.info, mainly as a proof of concept. I think there's not that much Coptic material on papyri.info, at least compared to Greek. But we have some of their documentary papyri here. The ones you see on the screen now are from papyri.info. Here's one about, I don't know, honey delivery. So this is directly from papyri.info. And we simply applied our tools to that. This is the linguistic analysis. And so this kind of data will also be included in the next release with entities, although we would like to get much more documentary material if we can. Most of what we have is literary Coptic.
Okay, so, and there are 3 questions from Elise Zofia Link. The first one is a secondary use possible, like distinguishing body part terms as nouns and grammaticalized from their use in compound prepositions, grammaticalized? The second question is, did you have cases in which this distinction was difficult to make? The third one is, what tool do you use for the dynamic network analysis? She guesses it is something you adapted, not something you developed from scratch.
Sure, so I can answer all of those. First of all, yes, literal body parts are distinguished from figurative prepositions, in that figurative prepositions are, according to the annotation guidelines, not included at all. So if you say in hate, first of all, we view that as a form of hin anyway, but that's not a real hate. Whereas if somebody says something that's going on, you know, pahet, mok, or something like that, then you will have an abstract. So we don't, with heart, the guideline says that unless somebody is actually talking about a physical organ, we treat that as an abstract, whereas arms and head are typically treated as concrete objects. But if you have ijof and it's not the head of somebody, then that's not annotated at all. So yes, they are absolutely distinguished. And yes, it's sometimes tricky. We had some discussions about things we didn't want to include. I have a really good example. There are some very idiomatic cases like metwe or something like that, which really just means remember. It's not a thought that you can awoke metwe, right? You wouldn't say, and this thought was very troubling or something. So there are some things that we don't include because they're idiomatic. But in general, we've erred on the side of caution and tried to include as many nouns as possible. What was the other question? The network analysis. That's just D3JS, I think. Or, I need to look again what framework we use, but nothing spectacular, just some JavaScript framework. I think it might have been D3JS.
Okay, there are many questions from Julian Bogdani. Would it have been more stable and probably linked open data LOD friendly to link to Wikidata entities instead of Wikipedia URLs? Oh yeah, I also had such a question. That would make the link language agnostic.
Yeah, we thought about that a little bit. So usually a Wikidata page will have the link to the English page. So backwards, it's easy to get back to Wikidata, but not all Wikipedia articles have Wikidata links. And this seems to be particularly common in the case of some of the hagiographic entities that we were interested in. So for a lot of desert fathers, they might have a Wikipedia link, but they might not have a Wikidata entry. And so because the Wikidata entries where they exist do link back typically to the English Wikipedia article if they link to anything, we thought it would be easier to do a backwards index from the Wikidata entries.
Okay, and there's a question from Miriam. That is a very promising project with already tangible, excellent results. I presume that months, years, and seasons fit within events entity. Now, how about you correlations between Coptic dates and their corresponding Arabic years? Very many thanks.
So time entities like seasons and years are actually folded into the time entity type, not into the event entity type, because I guess we didn't consider something like the year 436 to be something that happened. Rather, it is a period of time. Of course, the year happened as well. The event label is used more for events like the death of someone or a war. So polemos could be an event. And very often nominalized verbs. Also, because we do anything, including non-named events, also, tref anything, the time they made somebody do something, that would also be an event. In terms of absolute resolution of date terms, we don't have anything like that at the moment. So while we do resolve identified times, such as the month of Bermuda, we don't actually have something like ISO time annotations for, and we reconstruct that this means the following ISO date and UTC or something like that. That would be cool to do maybe, but I should say that Coptic literary texts that we have don't have a ton of uniquely identified time terms. So very often it will just say, and 3 years later or something like that. And maybe philologically you'd be able to reconstruct it, but it's a little bit beyond our ability to do that.
Okay, and the next question is from Julian Schauder concerning the linked data on Wikipedia, assuming some entities may not have yet an entry on Wikipedia, but might get one in the future. Are these being followed up and how? Followed up on and how?
So we do have a kind of placeholder entity type for named entities that do not have a link. So we do know all of the entities in our data that are named but don't have a link. So it wouldn't be difficult to go back and find those. In fact, Wikipedia is editable. So it's actually maybe something of a good deed if we add some of these entities into at least stub articles on Wikipedia to say, well, this slightly less famous desert father might not have a Wikipedia page, but we can add them. And then, of course, we could add those links into our data. So the answer to that is basically, we know the ones that we didn't do, and we can go back and do them whenever we have time. Currently, we're just starting out, so we haven't scheduled a revision yet.
Okay, the next question is from Asmahan Abu al-Assad. Is Ethiopian monastery in Egypt mentioned in Coptic text? Probably it is not so.
I haven't seen that yet, but there are way more qualified people to answer that question in this Zoom room. So please, anybody who has seen references to Ethiopian monasteries in Egypt, please post to the Zoom chat and help Ismahan Abu al-Assad.
Okay. From Halali Hagel, what adaptations are needed so to apply it to other Coptic dialects than Sahidic?
This is a fantastic question. I'm really glad you asked that. The answer is easy and hard. The easy answer is data. The hard answer is data. You need to make data. So a lot of the paradigms that we use right now are based on empirical training data, and the more examples we have of something, the better we can make it. I am very, very interested in expanding the project to other dialects. We're hoping to be able to apply for funding to do that at some point in the future. Currently, there's still so much to do for Sahidic that I'm really torn about it because I don't want to quit before we're done. But I also know that we'll never be done. And I absolutely love other dialects, including Bohairic. And well, some of them are, so Nag Hammadi or something might almost get some usable results using Sahidic tools, but something like Bohairic would indeed require a new data set to train on.
Great. And the next question is from Miriam. The question about Coptic and corresponding Hijri dates is from, it's,
Yeah.
I don't know. Oh yeah, okay, I understand.
Yeah, if someone were able to give me any dates for the events in our corpora, converting them to Hijri would be easy. We could take care of that. I mean, notwithstanding the indeterminacies about Hijri date conversion, doing that computationally is not difficult. The problem is that we don't have any absolute date resolution of any of the things in our corpus. So, except for metadata, we do have some, manuscript not before or not after. Whatever is known about the manuscript history is encoded in dated metadata, but not mentioned dates inside texts.
Great. The last question is from, Asmahan Abu Al-Assad. Please, could you send the websites mentioned in this workshop by email? Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
right?
we can also do a summary of some of the things on the website, but for now, I'm just going to post everything to everyone on the chat. I see somebody's asking me also, what was the name of that JavaScript library? I'm just going to post all of those in the chat. You can already set up the next talk so that we don't get into delays.
He also says I cannot save them from Zoom. Yeah, but you can save it from the.
Look at the chat and copy it out.
Yeah, there's 3 dots above the chat, above the text window in the chat, and it's right top corner of the text window. Type message here, and if you click it, you can have save chat, and then you can save the chat dialogue. I really recommend it. And the last question from Asmahan, did you add your project website to papyri.info and Arabic Papyri database?
What do you mean by add the website to? Like contribute our data to papyri.info? Most of our data is not papyri, documentary papyri. We have literary text.
I imagine I guess he's talking about the links between the Coptic
So we do
scriptorium
have the metadata. If something is attested in another project, we have the links to our work IDs in paths, in papyri.info. All of those things are linked. We haven't contributed our literary text to papyri.info, although they're very welcome to them if they wanted to start publishing literary texts. But those are just simply not papyri. All of our data is openly available on GitHub, including in TI-XML and some other formats. So they're very welcome to include it. And we are on good terms with papyri.info, but I don't think they're interested in this kind of literary Coptic texts.
Okay. So that's all. Yeah, thank you. I'm also very amazed with this very flexible query language of ANIS. You can also now you can also search the named and non-named entities with ANIS query language. This is really fantastic.
This is only for the tree bank right now. It's going to be for the remaining corpora, hopefully at the end of summer.
Okay, sure. Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, I can't wait. Thank you. That's great for all the linguists in Coptic language. Okay, thank you so much, Amir. We are okay. We are a bit late, 10 minutes late, but our final presentation will be given by Hareli Harel from Universität Hybrid Jerusalem, the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Her presentation is building an interactive Bohairic Coptic thematic lexicon. Okay, please, Hareli, the floor is yours. Amir, could you make Hareli co-host?
She should be able to share her video, but she has to unmute
Can you
herself.
hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. And do you see the presentation?
Yes, perfect.
We can't see you any longer. Yeah, I will make you invisible. So, hello everyone around the world. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to present a resource I'm currently working on as a part of a research project being carried out at the Police Institute at Jerusalem. And the purpose of this project is not only research, it is also an exploration of the way we create and disseminate knowledge for a language community, which requires resources about their indigenous culture. And this compels us to consider and take use from both indigenous tradition and from academic tradition. So the objectives of this project, which has a working title for now, SOTEM, also the domain that is not on yet is sotem.info, but it will soon be, so future viewers of this video on YouTube, you can go and you will be more satisfied than the audience I have now. So the objectives are, one, related to resources, to create a thematic lexicon that documents examples of each lexical item, Neo-Bohairic or spoken Bohairic lexical item, and exposes the genre and the time it was attested at, and by that we have a side effect of gradually creating a linked and annotated corpora of Bohairic. And our other objective is related to community. It's to offer a space which facilitates digital publication of teaching material of a program and promotes an open discussion about the lexicon and grammar phonology of a spoken variety of Coptic, of Bohairic, sorry, but it is Coptic. So there are people with a lot of knowledge, both in the academic world and in the Coptic world. And by examining to-parent approaches, we want to allow a conversation to take place. And so a little context to what we're actually doing. Over the last few years, we have been offering a full immersion Bohairic Coptic class at the Police Institute in Jerusalem. So in order to teach this course, we had to create a compilation of lexical material and grammatical rules for instructing Coptic in a spoken medium. And the classes are based on TPR, total physical response, and living sequential expression methods, which were developed at the Police Institute. And Police offers full immersion language courses in Koine Greek, Latin, Biblical Hebrew, spoken Fusha, Syriac, and even Sumerian ones. So actually our students' multilingual abilities of spoken and literary Greek, Arabic, and now Coptic imitates perfectly the complex linguistic setting in Egypt of the first millennia. So we can do theater shows of reality that took place in Egypt. So this method actually focuses on learning through listening as speaking first, and reading and writing at a later stage, embedding the language in real-life scenario which imitate natural language acquisition by a child. So the first phase of the project will culminate in the publication of the teaching material, which is a course book and a practice book titled Why Snai Shomt, which is a comic book written entirely in Coptic. Oh, sorry. And these resources are already slated to be used to teach Bohairic in a preschool program in Egypt, which is actually the source of our funding, and will be made available for other programs as well. So the lexical material collected for these two books is the first data to be published in the website I'm presenting today. And like I said, it's not online, but it will soon be. So while creating these books, the project has formed as a byproduct. I end up collecting resources to support each lexical item I choose to use by examples that are really found in ancient sources. And I started tagging them for themes, as I will explain later. So this presentation is simply my work notes about this project and thoughts on how to execute it using all the advanced valuable resources offered by Coptology project. So I would really appreciate your comments and feedback afterwards. So this is how whiteboard looks like in a Coptic immersion class. Here on the right, it was a restaurant that student came and prepared food in Coptic. Or another, maybe too much words on one whiteboard. So let's start talking about building an interactive Bohairi Coptic thematic lexicon. So in the time remaining, I will dissect this headline. And the first part we will start with is, of course, Bohairi Coptic. So what does Bohairic stand for? When we say Bohairic, we refer to several linguistic varieties, and I will attempt here at simplifying a rather debated body of evidence. So for a literary variety of Bohairic, Kasser developed a very highly granulated definition of the variants, but in a more broad way, you can say you have early varieties, a Paleo Old Bohairic of the, let's say, 4th century, which has varieties that Kasser gave certain names, but other authors propose aggregating all those early sources as one complex body of evidence and identifying the varieties that appear by minute grammatical description when enough data about them will be available. So then we have this mysterious gap between the 5th and 9th century, and then we have Bohairic resurfacing in the collection of texts authored at what we call Nitrian, or more precisely Scythian texts originating from the monastery of St. Macarius, and then the formation of this scriptural medieval classical Bohairic, which became the liturgical language of the Coptic Church a bit later. So aside from written documents, on another note, much of the reality of what Bohairic was as a spoken language remains a mystery. It is not much documented in documentary non-literary sources. So, and its native written documentation, like philological works, begins very, very late. So what we do know is it's an Egyptian dialect of the region of Lower Egypt that gradually declines as a spoken language after Arab conquest. And we know it is the liturgical language of the entire Coptic Church from the early 2nd millennium up until this day. And we know what various attempts of spoken Bohairic in the last 2 centuries based on traditions, scriptures, liturgy, and some lexical innovations. And we also know tales about meeting someone who is fluent in Coptic in a village somewhere in Egypt. And we know of people around the world practicing spoken Bohairic. So a starting point is our evidence of classical medieval Bohairic. And this will instigate us to re-examine the varieties question with the help of modern tools. And our corpus is also not the Sahidic corpus. It's much smaller, 10 times smaller. But since Bohairic has been used by Copts extensively in the last millennium, it has a long text-producing tradition of this type of manuscripts, of the manuscripts used in liturgy. And we will, out of this corpus, start by documenting selected Old Testament and New Testament medieval Bohairic source manuscript. And we aim to create corpora by standard offered by Coptology projects. And the reason also for choosing this is the way we, Christophe Ricoeur, my supervisor at Police Institute, made a spoken version of Koine Greek by using the Old and New Testament. And we are creating like a parallel Coptic universe. So just a note about our grammatical progression. We identify literary and spoken Coptic varieties in our teaching material, and we introduce the grammar gradually and accept also traditional conversational forms that are not documented actually in written language. So, for example, the very common modern spoken Bohairic term nofri is actually not a common find in written sources. So what we can do is teach the real use of adjective verb and research where we first encounter greetings as nofri shai, nofri eho, as they might do represent a native spoken tradition that we want to document. And what we actually do is taking the grammatical works done on Bohairic and bringing them to life. So recording as much typical direct speech forms and using the apparatus of Ariel Shisha Levi of narrative versus the dialogue text team and actually speaking it. So let's go into the lexicon part. So the native Coptic lexicography starts in Sulam or Scala type works when Coptic is really not spoken anymore. So in the 13th century, you have this type of compositions called Moki and in Bohairic Coptic. And this was also the ground for Western scholarship, as Kircher published such works in his work. And all the Copto-Arabic philological works and grammars are the starting point of this project, and I will explain later how I'm inserting this data into the database as well. So Kircher documentation of these sulams was actually, here you can see in the work notes of Champollion, unpublished Coptic grammar, the importance of that material, because his Champollion's access to Kircher's publication was key for his decipherment of the hieroglyphs. So we still had this type of Coptic Arabic lexicographica. So throughout the 19th and partly in the 20th century, maybe until today, we had a Coptic Renaissance for spoken Coptic. And this tradition have been taken into account also, and the lexical material and innovations they offer are recorded. So some new neologisms that are suggested are added and given credit to the person who offered this neologism. So in 18th and 19th centuries, Bohairic was the variant of Coptic that was first accessible through the church to scholars. But as Western scholarship of Coptic took shape and the marking of dialectal forms began and understanding of the variety of Coptic text, those Arabic translations gradually stopped being included, and also Bohairic was a bit left aside. So Bohairic lexicography has received really not much attention, though its grammar was treated in very few but very thorough and interesting publications, such as Ariel Shisha Levi Topics. Earlier, Bohairic was treated in Eitan Grossman's doctoral dissertation, and an unpublished grammar by Matthias Muller, which actually described the corpus I'm working on and is a very big help for the creation of this project. So finds gathered about Coptic and were studies, and our dictionaries grew and grew up until the size of Cram, that we need now a whole Coptic dictionary in line to contain. So in this project, what we can do today, and we couldn't before, is that we couldn't know anything about the organization of the lexicon. We couldn't know about the frequency of entry, about synonyms and polysemy and meaning change. And in our class, we want to allow students to see a broader image of the lexicon than the one when you open a dictionary. We want them to have rich layers of the language. People can produce poetic composition, tell jokes, and have awareness of the register and source of literary layers they're using. So I will now go in over the data fields I am collecting. It started by just taking the Bohairic portion of Quram in an Excel table and annotating it with real source examples. But then now it developed a bit. So for each lexical item in our Bohairic lexicon, it has its own ID, then it is linked to its TLA ID, then to a dialectal form, which not all are online. So of course, if I am recording data that is not there, all the data that I collect here can be used by other projects. Then for each lexical item, I immigrate here the references of other works, other dictionaries. And I also, of course, everything with full credit to the Coptic Dictionary Online, provided translation of Qram. Actually, my source data is from Marcion, but we will see. And what I do add is sometimes those Arabic translation of earlier philological works about Bohairic, because there is so much interesting data there, and it is a very important step in order to recreate this dialect. And also meaning into Coptic when we have the energy for that, which we always have. And then for each item, themes, which I will talk about now. And then I also mark what is like an example that has no ancient source and where was it taken from. I write a comment about it. And those Coptic words are, like I said, based on real examples, tokens, examples from source texts. So for now I have many context lines, but what I want to change now is to work to create bigger corpora. So these lines can be adapted using the tools like the NLP surveys and maybe creating better tag set for Bohairic and working on that, like we just talked that we need more data. And of course, those examples from Bohairic texts that are not much documented in Coptology projects will be linked to all relevant metadata where it exists in museum collection, CMCL, other formats or, of projects like PADS, and wherever we can, link those to other projects, those texts, those Bohairic texts we are studying. And of course, comments, and each lexical page item also has recordings. So this is another talk we need to have about the phonology. And in the user interface, people can add comments about it. And okay, so now the last parts of dissecting our headline, let's go through it faster. Tagging themes, so it was very interesting for me to listen now to this talk about entities, and I even managed to, I saw the headline before, and then I looked into entities in Coptic scriptorium, and I think it's very, very promising to also add them. But what I was doing is that I took the Bohairic portion of Qram and I tagged lexical fields. So the lexical fields offered by world project, a linguistic typology project that are now used in projects like Concepticon. And I just went over these 3,000 entries, but most of them are just variation of lexical item, like with certain preposition, and I added lexical fields. And then I also marked themes and categories suggested in philological Coptic works. So those Sulam works are like, we looked too fast at it before, but they have those categories. And then themes of polis method, which is like words relating to the kitchen, to the school, right? This project is all about organizing the lexicon, and also doing it with entities is very interesting for us, will be. What I'm planning to do is also to have open calls for Coptologists and everyone interested when we are working on a specific theme, because, when Ben Yehuda revitalized Hebrew language, there was this thing of recreating themes and people doing research and offering items. And this platform is built in a way that users and researchers can contribute a reference, a comment about an entry. They can say, I have an example of this word, and add an example, and then more Coptic and more Bohairic data is collected. They can suggest another item, and we have songs and activities in the course, so they can also upload audios and videos of them. So it's a very collaborative project. It will be available, and I will inform everyone interested. And just on a last note, so within the first stage of the project, the website will be up with the database of all the words that appear in those 2 course books that I talked about. It will be accessible through the Polis Jerusalem org/language Coptic. So I will update it in our workshop webpage. And our goal is making tradition of lexicography and textual studies more accessible to students that want to practice spoken variety of Coptic. And we want to use building blocks that are of the Coptic Digital Humanities project, and everything will be available for reuse. So gradually the structure and frequency and hapax and loans of the Bohairic lexicon will be evaluated and displayed. So thank you so much. I hope I probably talked too fast. This is it for today. And now I will.
Okay, Tisha Pechmot, Hareli. Thank you so much. Thank you for a very impressive talk. That is very impressive that you teach Bohairic in Bohairic with an immersion method. I'm curious about the connection between your project and also language revitalization movement by Copts, represented by Claudius Labib that you mentioned. Do you plan to collaborate with Copts who would like to revitalize Bohairic? Also, have you get some concrete tips from the method of the Hebrew revitalization by Eliezer Ben Yehuda?
Yeah. So actually the funding for this project, I can say it, but it's from a foundation called Amazon Foundation, which is American foundation that supports an institution called in Egypt called Anaphora, and there they practice teaching for a very big program of a lot of kindergarten children, and they asked for us to make these books. So yeah, it's connected to people who are actually in Egypt trying to use this material, and I think this is why I also wanted to make other Coptologists join the conversation, because I want the data I put in this book to be, seen by others and approved and checked. Because it's, it's a big task. It's not something that a person can do. It's something a community can do. So I think all of us interested can join this task, and I will work to make it, to facilitate it, to be easy for you to, you know, say, ah, yeah, I know another lexical item. And also we can, in some point, fill gaps from other dialects. You know, we start from Buhayrik, but the way Ben Yehuda worked, so we have words from different layers of Hebrew, from the Mishnah, from Mikra, like from different historical phases. So as long as we are like, there is so much information in the internet about this sort of spoken variety of Coptic. And what I want to do is to make accessible the real data behind it, and like to make a resource, and then people can use it in their way and think differently.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, here coming several questions. There are two questions from Elise Sophia Linke. Where can I pre-order the two books? Yes, I'm also very curious about it. And
I will
also,
send you a copy.
and also the another one, could you reference of a publication on the police method?
Yeah, so there is maybe, I think in the website I'm setting, I will create a page, but Christophe Rico just published, I think, an article. So search up Christophe Rico. He does very impressive work. And, you know, he has this amazing place in this school in Jerusalem that is full of people speaking, coming from all around the world and speaking Arabic and Coptic, and fluently after 1 year there. And I think he has few publications, but it's mostly practiced as a method, as a teaching method.
Okay. Also, Lola Slota is asking, do the categories suggested by medieval works differ from modern categories?
Yeah, you know, those categories are not, I think the semantic fields works quite well because they are similar to what we want to instruct, because they are modern. So the way semantic fields works is nice. And I plan to have this option to sort the lexicon through either semantic fields or entities or those medieval titles. So there you have sometimes things are chunked under like grammatical terms, like I had a slide with like imperative forms, okay? So sometimes it's important, but it's not all so thematic, but there are interesting thematic chunks there.
Oh, so yeah, Amir is asking, this work is, yeah, he's saying this work is amazing. And he's asking, is the corpus data available online somewhere? And how about the spreadsheet mapping TLA IDs to Bohairic forms from CRAM? Yeah, TLA means Thesaurus Lingua. Yeah.
So, you know, I will continue this conversation with you because I create data and I want to do it, you know, in the way that is promoted. I think another thing is to really work on like how everybody, all cryptologists, can create data that, you know, this dictionary, it is like a separate site, but we want to not to have many dictionaries. The dictionary is the Coptic dictionary online, okay? And then I make this like, I make this, no, because it's Coptic, you know, it's not English that we need now to create a few dictionaries, I don't think. So I think I will publish it as a data set. I need to think how to do it exactly. And like the text, you know, text that I have, I think the correct steps will be to run them through like Coptic scriptorium tools and release them in some way after, with some supervision on that from people who supervise the project. And
let me just say, if you're interested in adapting the part of speech tagging scheme, I'd be very interested in talking about what would need to be done for Bohairic to be supported and getting a test data set I think with even a very small amount of data, you will already get much better performance from the tools because the tools only know Sahidic right now. So
yeah, I saw that they don't,
5,000
I
words.
checked them a bit and I saw that they don't know like place name, because of the pronunciation, they don't know a lot of the nouns, but the grammar is quite okay.
I think the schema is very suitable. You'd need to change very little. There's just one or two auxiliaries and forms that you would need to change that are special to Bohairic. But if you even give me something like 5,000 words of tagged Bohairic with the parts of speech and the segmentation, you'll already see an immense improvement in performance. It's always the first 80% that are the easiest. And then you wouldn't believe how hard it is to get from 95 to 96% correct.
Okay, so I will look into it and do it.
Let's stay in touch. Thank you.
Good.
Great. And Fadi Rafat is writing in Coptic. Tishapech Mot and Toti. Yeah, thank you to you. And Miriam Wissa, she's writing wonderful project. Heartfelt congratulations. I am so glad to finally see works going beyond the lexicon from grammatical viewpoint and look at phonology, speech, etc. in brief spoken aspects. It is great you start from the 2nd century. However, it would be extremely insightful to not forget the 1st century, during which all Coptic emerged in a pagan milieu with prayers, magical papyri, and many of them served as glosses to original hieratic and demotic equivalents. Do you have some comments?
Okay. So Old Coptic, you know, we need to start somewhere, and in order to start and imagine how Coptic was spoken, we use the medieval texts, but then of course we can expand the lexicon. So we are working on having a bigger familiarity with the culture. It will evolve over time as in its spoken medium.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. And there's a question from Koshi Dosu. Thanks for your fascinating project. This is a very obvious question, but I wonder which phonological scheme you use in the spoken course. Yeah,
okay, so we're using Old Bohairic pronunciation with some adaptations, and in this website I'm creating, I will put, you know, with phonological sound recordings, a page that how we pronounce, but it is debated. We do it because the program we created, the material for, follows Old Bohairic pronunciation.
Okay, okay, I got it. And also, yeah, from Medium Visa, Agapi from Medium, and I will also acquire the volumes. Yeah, that's awesome. Everybody is waiting for your volumes. And from Fadi Rafat, thanks for your great project. I just want to share with you the below doctoral thesis done in 1975 in Oxford on phonology of the Coptic Bohairic. They will be very helpful for you. It is about 4,000 pages. Oh, it is about old Bohairic.
Really shocked my head.
Yeah, he's very. What do you think about it?
It's amazing work that also there is so much knowledge to extract out of it. But this is what's great about those digital projects, that we can change the format of things that maybe people can get glimpse out of there without reading such a long book.
Okay.
In handwritten Arabic and English.
Okay, and yeah, also there's a link from Fadi Rafat to Coptic Sounds made by Ambrose. It was made by Ambrose, right? Ambrosius.
Boles, yeah. He did the Coptic sounds and many resources that are very valuable.
Oh yeah, this is a article by Ishak Emil Maher. And from Elise Sofia Linke, for those of you interested in OCR, here are the promised DOIs. Yeah. So it's about her talk. Yes. Yeah. These are five. Yeah. This is a paper by Elise and OCR data repository. And Koshi says, thank you very interesting. It will be great to see your notes on both Bohairic pronunciation. As far as all Coptic goes, I think there are some possible Northern Bohairic-like forms in the early part of PGM, PGM4, which Edward Love has discussed in his book Code Switching with the Gods, but it's a fairly brief text.
Okay, interesting. I will look into it.
Okay, so yeah, I read all the questions, I think. Okay, thank you so much, Tisha, Behmot, and Toti. Thank you, Haleli.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I think I didn't read the comments from Mate Jose now about Frank's presentation. He said we don't use that anymore. I think it is about Coletex. We have a tool from Birmingham. So they are using the new tool, and he put the link on the comments. Yes.
I think we're running into overtime here, so we should maybe take 5 minutes break to refresh ourselves, and then that concludes today's public session. There's going to be a private discussion of the presenters about collaboration projects. If somebody wants to be included in that, who hasn't received the invitation link, please send us an email. That's going to be an internal project discussion about funding and other initiatives. We'll resume with the public talks tomorrow morning according to the schedule. And I think the Zoom link is going to stay the same one, but the YouTube link will be a new one. So if you're tuning into YouTube tomorrow, please check the conference website. We will post the new YouTube link. It seems whenever we start the live stream new, it will make a new YouTube link. It's going to be on the same channel. So if you're subscribed to the channel, you will get it. And if not, please just look at the website tomorrow at the same time based on the schedule, and there will be a new YouTube link. The Zoom link is the same one. The Zoom link for the private closed discussion is a separate Zoom link because that one is not publicly available. All right, I think that should be it.
Okay.
If anybody has any trouble, just send us an email.
Okay, and how about taking a group photo?
Oh, wow.
Many Zoom conferences are doing that, so why don't we?
You know how to do that? So, because
Haleli, could you close the
sorry.
screen sharing?
I don't know where is my
photo.
If you can, if it is okay with you, that please please turn on your camera. Okay, let's take a group photo. Oh, there are two. There are two windows. Okay, I will take the photo now. Okay, 1, 2, 3, cheers. Okay, the next. Wait a minute.
Oh, you're just grabbing page by page. Sure.
Okay. Wait a minute. Okay, the second page. Wait a minute. Is it working? I think. Oh, sorry. Amia, could you take the photo because my computer is frozen a bit.
So I don't know if I have the same page arrangement. I can screen grab both pages. That'd be easy.
Yeah, could you do it from the first page?
Okay, page 1. Cheers, everybody. Say cheese. I need to save that somewhere. All right, now I'm going to take page 2. Everybody smile. Page 2, cheese. All right, that should be it.
Great. Thank you, Amir. Thank you, everyone.
All right. All right, I'll see everyone in 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for coming.